Good evening, guys. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff Lives. And tonight, it's Mindfields. And Mindfield is basically where my mind has been wandering. And I wandered back into some of my old Maryland history today. And I thought you might enjoy taking a little trip with me into some of the early English settlers. The time when there was Indians everywhere. Uh, my area, which is southern Maryland, generally, and more specifically Charles County, Maryland, was just teeming with Native American settlements of uh, different sub tribes. Uh, I'm not an expert, but the general name for the Indians around here is the Piscataway Indians. And I know that there's a town up in New Jersey called Piscataway, and that's an Algonquian name that's just kind of a generic name. It's about a place. I think it means like a bend in a river or a crossing, something like that. But it's specific to the Indians, or if I may use that term, and I hope you don't mind, just for this convenience, that that the English encountered here in southern Maryland, and the the encounter began, of course, with the Catholics, and we've talked a bit about the Catholic settlement in Maryland in 1634 in the course of uh, our Rulers of Evil reading of Tupper Saucy, who refers specifically to the Carroll family, John Carroll, the first bishop of in America, the first Catholic bishop in the what would be the United States, and the power of that universal church, the Roman Catholic Church, extended into right in the middle of British Protestant North America, and all of the politics behind that, which are fascinating. Well, that happens back in 1634. Now we're moving forward a generation because the first settlers from England are Catholic or indentured servants. Uh, More indentured servants numerically, but uh, better financed ones, the Catholic ones. It was a refuge, as you know. Maryland was created as a place for Catholics who were not allowed to openly practice their religion in England. But in order to populate it, in order to get the work done, they imported quite a few indentured servants, uh, people freed from the jails, and but usually under a term in which by 7 years they would get free of their indentures and were entitled to certain little items that were very important, like a set of clothes, a pair of shoes, perhaps a hat. Uh, Things we would think negligible now, but imagine how how important those things were in the frontier of English civilization. So anyway, um, this this all's about McDuff. Who is a McDuff? McDuff is my dad, and McDuff is Thomas F. O'Loughlin Jr., who chose to raise his family in Oxon Hill, Maryland. And Oxon Hill, Maryland is the home of the Addison family plantation that was called a manor. It was called Oxon Hill Manor, and still is called Oxon Hill Manor. It's right next to uh, National Harbor and kind of sandwiched between National Harbor and the outlets. But it's a beautiful property, and George and I have visited there a number of times. Yes, yes. So there was a question about the trio. The trio, about 2 weeks ago, we decided mutually that we were going to let it go. That it had probably served to excite an awful lot of people in the the presentation, and the way that it all mixed together was just magical. But I think, after about a year and a half, if I'm not mistaken, there's only so much time in one's life, and production of a show takes time every week. And frankly, I think other things were beckoning. So, not saying anything about the future, but for Thursdays right now, I am probably going to be doing Mindfields, because I've added more interviews during the week. I might as well explain this now. On Wednesday nights, which I used to just read or something, I have now got a guest, and it's the alternating team of Mark Kulak, who was last night, and David Underdown, who will be next week. And that is a kind of a treat that we have to look forward to in the future, something new. And who knows whether we might decide to make a little trio out of that. We also have now Andy DeBala, who is not only producing but also hosting his own show, and his work is really exciting too. So we'll be certainly integrating more of his work into our weeks, and the continuing relationships we have with Garland Nixon, Harley Schlanger, and Bill Taylor. Um, Amber Connor, all of these will continue, but of course that takes an evening too. So Thursdays is a good night for me to just catch up with you, maybe just kind of more personally, and do a minefields. And I enjoy being able to just talk about what's on my mind, in the context of my dad. And my dad, he loved history. He loved local history. We were always going up to Fort Washington Park, and he would tell us about the various battlements and how they were built. He knew all about brickwork and the early forms of concrete, and where the guns were and how they would be set, and where they could hit. It was it was fun. When we had a chance to go out and do things, because he did know history and he loved it, and so I do too. Took George up to Fort Washington a couple of times, and we talked about the battle, the naval versus the fort that happened there in 1814. Well, I wanted to tell you about Colonel John Addison and the Piscataway Indians tonight. Marie, you missed Mark, and you'll have to replay. Yeah, definitely do that. And guys, remember, I hope you will enjoy, if you have some spare time, to explore Screaming Ospreys TV. You will find all of my recent shows there, rotating in various ways on 4 different channels. It's kind of amazing, and I lucked into this application, and I'm enjoying it. So anyway, you'll find Mark has an entire channel there called Housatonic Select, and you'll be able to find replays of all of his great stuff. Again, I'll be supplementing it as we get new stuff and rotating things in and out. But it's fun and it's a pleasure. And so and Mark's work I think is so essential that I want everybody to have it at hand. Mark Kulak, Housatonic Live, and Housatonic Live 2, which is where he's been most active lately. Both of those are YouTube. Yeah, Professor Hamamoto will be back with me in a week or two. I can't remember, but he and I are going to continue at least once a month, as I will be doing with Garland Nixon and a number of other folks as we can work out our schedules. But that's the plan. Is I do want to have at least one Mindfields a week. And I do want to keep reading. So I'll be reading Monday mornings at 11. And then Friday evenings, I'll also be reading. Tomorrow night, I'll be picking up Rulers of Evil once again, chapter 7. And I hope you can join me for that. Uh, these books, these new twists on American history are very, very important if we want to try to change. We have to change the narrative, and we have to change the narrative by going back and finding the real narrative, the real truth. This is why I am now on this. I'm on part 25 of my readings of this, and usually almost an hour of reading. Um, and honestly, it is an amazing story. It's like the author Graham Lowry has gone back to the Puritans, and instead of giving us these disjointed stories of this happened and then this happened and then there was a Stamp Act and then this happened, um, he's given a real narrative of the idea of uh, true Republican government coming from the roots in England through the Massachusetts colony and then into the other colonies, and how that uh, centers then where we're at right now around Benjamin Franklin. But this new look at the first 150 years uh, is going to help us to work through the problems that we've been burdened with, and understanding things like the Civil War, like the Jim Crow, in understanding things like the persistence of illogical, crazy racism, things, the willingness to engage in a European war again in World War II. These things don't make sense unless we understand more and more and more of the background. Well, now let's look at the tiny end of history, just a few incidents from the past of Oxon Hill, Maryland, and the area that would eventually become Washington, D.C. Oh, I have to introduce the book. This is one of my favorite books. This is Captains and Mariners of Early Maryland. And it is by Raphael Semmes. Now, those of you know the name Raphael Semmes as the admiral of the CSS Alabama in the Civil War, the commerce raider that was, such a successful, uh, destroyer of merchant shipping. And this Raphael Semmes, I have never been able to know exactly how they're related, but this one is related to the major law firm in Baltimore, which is Sims, Bowen, and Sims. So, and this is printed by the Johns Hopkins Press in 1937. Okay, 1937, language from Johns Hopkins Press. You're going to hear some words you might not like savage. Okay, I'm just warning you. This is not my language. This is old 1937, but I think it's worth it. So please bear with me. And if you don't like it, that's okay with me too. All right, enjoy. After Maryland had become a crown colony, okay, I got to explain this. Remember when we were talking in Graham Lowry's book about the original charter in Massachusetts, and then eventually that was taken away and it became a crown colony. Well, Maryland had a charter granting the colony to Lord Baltimore, but this was taken away also. And that happened during the ascension of William and Mary to the crown, because now you have a complete change in government and all kinds of things are shaking up. So here you have, instead of having to go through Lord Baltimore to get a piece of land in Maryland, now you can go directly to the crown, that meaning King William. So, and this is part of the scheme that we've been reading with Godolphin, Godolphin, the treasurer, who is introducing this speculative money scheme into the British Treasury that as we've identified as being the Venetian scheme, the unification of the Amsterdam banks with Prince William coming over into England and integrating that into the Bank of England, where the oligarchs are able to control the markets by manipulation, secret deals, and uh, and the type of things that unfortunately we see happening today. Okay, so after Maryland had become a crown colony, rangers, this is people on horseback with guns, okay? Rangers still continued to play an important part in the protection of the frontier plantations against hostile Indians. The members of Lionel Copley's council, the first royal governor, proposed, quote, to be the appointing of a standing number of fixed rangers upon the frontier parts of the country to be in constant service, and to watch and guard the frontiers of the province. Indeed, scouts were used, if anything, more extensively after Maryland had passed under the control of the king. This was due to the growth and expansion of the outlying settlements. It was not until near the end of the 17th century that plantations began to appear in the picturesque hilly country of old Baltimore County between the Susquehanna and the Patapsco rivers. The province had begun to expand beyond the tidewater areas. In order to protect these new settlements against attack by hostile savages, it was decided to erect 3 forts for the, quote, securing of the frontiers, with rangers maintaining communication between them. One of the 3 forts would be erected in Charles County by the direction and appointment of Captain John Addison. Addison, who came to Maryland in 1677, was a brother of Lancelot Addison, the Dean of Lichfield. The latter was the father of the celebrated Joseph Addison. Under the royal governors, Colonel Addison held a prominent position in the province, being a member of both the council and the provincial court. Another of the forts was constructed in Anne Arundel County at the direction and appointment of Colonel Nicholas Greenberry, and the other about the falls of the Patapsco in Baltimore County. Captain Richard Brightwell was to command the fort in Charles County, while Captain Thomas Richardson was at first given charge of the one in Baltimore County. Captain Addison and Colonel Greenberry were authorized and empowered to press and procure carpenter's work, laborers, provisions, tools, and other necessaries for erecting and building the said forts. Both officers were assured of being repaid for this expense at the public charge. Colonel Ninian Beale, or Bell, I should say, of Calvert County, was instructed by the governor and council to give all necessary aid and assistance to those engaged in the construction of the forts. Each fortification was to be built sufficiently large to accommodate a few soldiers. Near each of the forts, cabins were erected as quarters for friendly savages, whose assistance might be counted on against invading Indians. Captain Addison was ordered, quote, to treat with and procure of the Emperor of Piscataway 4 of his Indians for the fort in Charles County. Addison was also told to ask the kings of Mattawoman and Choptico Indians, who also lived in southern Maryland, for 2 of their tribesmen to help defend the fort in Anne Arundel County. On the eastern shore, Colonel Charles Hutchins of Dorchester County was instructed to endeavor to persuade the Emperor of the Nanticoke Indians to assist the Rangers with 6 of his subjects, 2 of whom would be stationed in the fort in Anne Arundel and the rest near the one erected in Baltimore County. Many thought it would be a good plan if the Indians were relieved and their places taken by other savages from time to time, quote, as the emperors and kings to whom they respectively belong shall think fit, unquote. While the exact location of the fort in Anne Arundel County is not known, the one built in what was then a part of Charles County was probably near the Little Falls of the Potomac River, northwest of the present site of Georgetown, in the District of Columbia. In the early period, the country in the vicinity of the fortification was known as New Scotland. 5 years after the erection of the fort here, in 1692, it was planned to construct another one upon the top of the hill near the other fort. Colonel Addison was instructed that he make arrangements to get a house built there at the cheapest rate he can, and that he get the timber ready for the stockados and see that the hill be cleared. He was also told to purchase a couple of small guns for the new fort, and also provide 2 or 3 good canoes besides a good substantial boat. Addison, to whom the land belonged on which the fortification stood, ordered the rangers later stationed there not only to clear the land of underbrush, but also to plant corn. This was clearly to his own advantage as landowner. Many thought that this fort at New Scotland should be maintained at any cost. Those who were of this opinion petitioned His Excellency the Governor that for His Majesty's the King's honor, the interest and safety of this county, and even the whole province, that the garrison at the Falls of the Potomac be maintained and supported as at present at the same time as inforted, and that the same number of rangers be kept out and maintained at the garrison or fort, and also at the frontier plantations, as they are now quartered and posted there. The petitioners were also of the opinion that it might be a good plan if a third fortified place or garrison be placed on the hill above the new fort, humbly conceiving it to be for His Majesty's honor rather to advance than lose ground in that place. Um, so let's stop and talk for a minute. Yeah, that map you've got there, Andy, is just great. Maybe if you could make me smaller and make the map bigger, I could, yeah. Okay, just now make it a little bit, zoom out a little bit so we can start with a bigger picture. Okay, now there's Maryland, and this is a map from about 1685, if I recall. We looked at it earlier. And the Potomac River branches to the left out of the Chesapeake Bay. Now, Andy's going to zoom in kind of slowly because we're going to zoom in on the part of Maryland that's called Southern Maryland, and that's all Charles County, Anne Arundel County, Calvert County, and St. Mary's County. It's all on the left side of the Chesapeake, and it's all between the Potomac and the Chesapeake Bay. And if you look up the Potomac from there, and that's good, keep going now, you'll see Mount Calvert there. That is where Lord Baltimore lives. Okay. And keep on going up a little higher. And to the left there, you see where the river narrows. and it says Potomac Falls in the text. That is the Potomac Falls, and that's what we're talking about there. That is Great Falls, in other words. In there's another great name there, Turkey Buzzard Point, and isn't it interesting that they would have called it Turkey Buzzard Point in 1685? That is the point down where the National War College is now. I can't remember the name of the point that they call it now, but it was originally uh, and probably should still be called Turkey Buzzard Point. Um, okay, so that's generally where we're at, and from there, you see, that's the frontier. There aren't any settlements in Maryland that are northwest of that um, point where the falls are. Now, all of that area um, is under Addison's control. And all of that area is the traditional home of the Piscataway Indians. All of it from all of those four counties um, and there are a number of different bands or tribes. And again, forgive me, I will not, I haven't studied it enough to give you the right terminology. But like the Mattawoman is a tribe, the Chaptico is a tribe, the Pamunkeys is a tribe, and then but the chief or the emperor, as the English call him in this book, is the emperor of the Piscataways, and he lives there at where it says Piscataways on the map there in the lower part, just between the words Charles and County. That's where he lives. That's a little town um, that that is still there. There's a little town called Piscataway, Maryland, and that area called Pamunkey there is where is called Indian Head now, where the Indian Head Naval Weapons Station is. So there's no more Indians there. Let's get back to some more reading. Let's skip ahead to what I think is the more important part of what I'm reading here, just to let you know. Okay, so you have Colonel Addison, who's the head of the militia, the head of the Rangers, as it was called back then, and it's their job to protect all the plantations from the hostile, quote unquote, savages. And we understand that this is a real danger. And I want to also to give you the idea that by this time the English in Southern Maryland have been living with the Indians in Southern Maryland for a long, long time, and they've intermarried, such as the Brent family. Um, the 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 original Catholic settlers of Southern Maryland did not distinguish against, did not have any problem with marrying into the Indian uh, bloodlines. And that happened. And that was part of the settlement, was to intermingle in a way. And if this is resonant with you, with your understanding of how the Jesuits would insinuate their Catholicism into a native population by by grabbing similarities and saying, this is this, and we're similar, and here's why how this works, and then gradually drawing them in that way. um, this same sort of idea is reflected in the fact that they intermarried. Well, maybe it was also just because of the attraction of the beautiful Native American women, but who knows? That's more of a romantic story from the Virginia colony. Pardon me. There's a number of wonderful vignettes in this book, and Addison is let's see, sprinkled through it. So oh, you guys are very kind. Just give me a second. I lost my place. Okay, I've got it. So there came a time when the original chief and the Indians, the main body of the Piscataway Indians, left, and the reason that they left has a lot to do with Colonel Addison and his militia. In order that the provincial authorities might exercise even greater supervisory power over the Indian tribes of southern Maryland, another proposal was brought forward under Governor Nicholson. This plan was that all the tribes of southern Maryland, including the Mattawamons and Chopticos, should go and live with the Emperor of Piscataway and be obedient to him during this time of war. The war to which reference is made was the one then going on between England and France, which was known in the colonies as King William's War. All the tribes were to leave their present location and assemble at the fort near the Little Falls of the Potomac. In other words, the fort that Addison had built that we read about a little while ago. As we have seen in a previous chapter, one of the forts used by the provincial rangers had been constructed here. The Indians were promised that although at this fort or garrison they would be under the jurisdiction of the Emperor of Piscataway, the kings of the individual tribes shall not lose their royalty. For this reason, all the savages were admonished, quote, to live lovingly and friendly together and not quarrel and fight. They were also told that, quote, they should not hold correspondence with or entertain any strange Indians without giving notice to and having consent of this government. And they were warned not to go beyond the garrison during this time of war without taking a pass from the governor of the fort, unquote. Not interesting to see. Indians can get a pass from the governor of the fort. The rulers of the southern Maryland tribes were told that if any of them refused to live with the emperor as soon as their corn is gathered, they should be reputed as enemies. So there you go. So there's all of these little tribes all around southern Maryland. And the order from Governor Nicholson, who is with the royalist side, he is the agent of the crown. And so he says, we're going to get all these Indians together. We're going to, we need to get them organized. So that's the plan. And King William's War, this is a war that American history doesn't talk about. It's certainly an important part of the founding of our country. You've heard of Bacon's Rebellion, 1676, but King William's War, all right, Andy, way to go. Here's King William's War, 1688 to 1697. Now, this is what's going on, okay? New France is, of course, the French colony, and it's still French. There is a war between England and France, and this is just part of that war. But the French, as we know, have Indian tribes, warriors, very warlike, and often under the control of the Jesuits. And as Graham Lowry has shown in his book, these tribes were used to harass and keep the English settlers pinned on the coast and to keep them from settling inland and developing inland commerce and cities. So that war is going on, and we have it as far as down as New England. But if you maybe there's another map that it would include Maryland and Virginia, which is just south of the map. But there was also action down there, and that's what's going on, and that's why the English government wants to get all of the so-called friendly Indians into a concentration, you know what I mean, where you can't leave without a pass. And they promise you they'll give you their, you'll get your land back, you'll get your houses back, right? But the idea is to organize them. And the effect is to destroy their culture, right? There you go. So part of these campaigns, there's Braddock's campaign, 1756. That was another disaster for George Washington. He lost two battles out there. Um, but then um, by now the British are now winning, and but nevertheless, you have the Iroquois Indians. The Susquehannock Indians are part of the Iroquois Confederacy at that point, and they are coming down and raiding, and they are enemies of the Piscataway. The Piscataway are kind of this. They're agrarian. They have been. Uh, they're like woodland Indians that don't migrate and chase the game like the northern Indians do. So the northern Indians come down in a seasonal way when the game starts disappearing um, from where they live. They come down and militarily take over for a little while and do their hunting, and then they go back home. The Seneca Indians are part of this. Let me read some more. It's better to get it from the author than from me. However, if they don't like this proposal, at the end of the war, if they come and acquaint his excellency therewith, then they shall be restored as they were, quote unquote. The colonial authorities promised the Indians that while they were at the fort near the Falls of the Potomac, the garrison will be maintained through his excellency, Governor Nicholson. In pursuance of this plan, Nicholson, as Captain General and Governor-in-Chief of the colony, issued a commission to Otomaqua, the Emperor of the Piscataways, to be chief commander and governor over all nations of Indians living within the limits of the province on the western shore, and for the rule and govern them in manner and form and by such rules and orders as is customary amongst you, willing and requiring all the several nations of Indians to be obedient and subject unto you, Otomaqua, in the execution of this our commission, under pain of our displeasure. Unquote. The Piscataway ruler was informed that he would hold this new title as commander in chief during the will and pleasure of Governor Nicholson. Although all the Indians of southern Maryland agreed to move to a place near the garrison of the Rangers at the Falls of the Potomac, the plan was never actually carried out. Only shortly after this proposal had been made, news reached the provincial capital that the Piscataways, Mattawoman, and Choptico Indians had all deserted their respective locations and had, quote, withdrawn themselves into the mountains of Virginia. The southern Maryland tribes, it seems, had gone to live in a mountainous district above the head of the Occoquan River, lying near 60 or 70 miles beyond the inhabitants, where they had been a fort and planted a corn. They had made a fort and planted a cornfield. The Occoquan River rises in the Bull Run Mountains of Fauquier County, Virginia. Between these mountains and the Blue Ridge Mountains to the west is a valley through which flows Goose Creek. The fort which the Indians erected probably stood somewhere in this valley, about 20 miles north of the present site of Warrenton. It's not without very good reasons that the former Aboriginal inhabitants of Maryland had left the colony. In the first place, the royal officials had gone much further than the Calverts had done in their attempt to regulate all their movements and actions. In the second place, these native tribes, though they gave their consent to move to the fort at the Falls of the Potomac, must have done so very reluctantly and unwillingly. As we have seen, during the proprietary period, they had not wanted to move to the Nanticoke proprietary because they feared that after they had left, the colonists would take possession of their lands. Although officials had promised them that this would not be the case, Royal Governor Nicholson and his council, on the other hand, intimated that before leaving their present location for the Falls of the Potomac, if they are willing to sell any part of their lands to the English, His Excellency is consenting thereto. Lastly, the Southern Maryland tribes resented the accusation that they were implicated in the murder of a Negro boy on the eastern branch of the Potomac. This colored youth, who was a slave of one James Stoddard of Prince George's County, had been murdered by some Indians, angered by the advantages which they thought the boy had taken of them in a trading deal. Okay, that's a lot to take in, right? We use the words Negro and YouTube. That was intentional. It's like you can't avoid it. It's right here, 1937. Okay, I'm not using it as a slant. But you know what I mean. I'd rather read you the actual text when I can, because it teaches us about who author Raphael Sims in 1937 is, and what Johns Hopkins, University represents in publishing this. It's a beautiful book. In view of the sudden and unexpected departure of the Southern Maryland tribes for Virginia not long after this murder, Governor Nicholson thought that every effort should be made to find out why these Indians had left the province, and also if they were in any way implicated in the murder of the Negro boy. Major William Barton was, on the governor's recommendation, chosen to visit the Emperor of the Piscataways at his new fort above the head of the Occoquan River in Virginia. After his return, Major Barton gave an account of his interview with the Indian ruler. Barton said that when he informed Otomaqua that some of his subjects were thought to have killed the slave belonging to Stoddard, the savage indignantly denied the charge. He said that he supposed it to be done by foreign Indians. The emperor had reason for this belief, as even the Negro who was murdered had said before his death that he did not know the savages who had assaulted him. Major Barton then asked Otomaqua what reason he and his subjects had for leaving Maryland. To this, the emperor replied that there were several reasons. In the first place, he said, Colonel John Addison had been particularly unfair toward his people. Addison told him, the Indian continued, that the only reason that he assumed the Piscataways were responsible for the death of the Negro youth was, quote, that there could be no murder committed but that they either did it or knew of it, and that they had nobody else to tax but them, and that they were but a handful of men and went to and again doing of mischief in the woods like wolves, unquote. Not only had Addison thus unfairly tried to hold the Piscataways responsible for all crimes, according to the emperor, the colonel and Captain John Holliday threatened that they would come and drive them from their fort. But these were not the only reasons Altamaquah had for leaving Maryland and for not wishing to return there again. He said that several people bought their lands over their heads so that they had no certainty of them, and there could be no hogs or shoats killed, but they were still blamed for it and called rogues and dogs, and that they English yearly time after time pulled down their fences and destroyed their cornfields before they can gather it. The Piscataways had left Maryland, the Indian rulers exclaimed, in order, quote, to secure themselves, their wives, and their children from the English who daily threatened them, unquote. Under the circumstances, the emperor declared he would not under any condition return to southern Maryland. He and his people wished to live peaceably where they were, and that the English should be welcome to come to their fort as often as they please. Othamaquah was justified in making these statements. Governor Nicholson himself had proposed that some way be found out that may occasion the ceding of a certain Indian tract of land situated between the Pamunkey and Mattawoman, extending at least 20 miles up the river of the Potomac, within the bounds and limits of Prince George's County. His Excellency thought that some plan should be discovered to oblige the Indians to suffer the ceding thereof, which will occasion a greater quantity of tobacco to be made, and also an advance and encourage the new county. Well, in a couple of minutes I have left, let me just try to tie that into my own life, as this is my area. This is where I grew up. And actually, the place that he was just talking about, saying why can't we make an Indian reservation, a tract of land in the new part of Prince George's County? Prince George's County is 1693, I think. The royal takeover of Maryland is 1692. They form a new county, Prince George's County, 1692 or 3, and into that comes the Protestants with money that want to come and set up their plantations. Well, Colonel Addison has been there for 20, 30 years now. He's the frontier ranger guy, and it's his job to what? He's like the Peter Struck, right? He's got to clear the land. And so by treating them as dehumanizing them and harassing them and blaming them for everything, psychological warfare, they just left. Well, that's the story. The reality is that many did not leave. Many are descendants of them are here right now. Very interesting and fascinating tribes that are still here, and I think it's fascinating and a wonderful thing to have a tradition that comes from before the English contact. And that that is a treasure that we have here in Southern Maryland. The people. Thanks for being with me tonight. I enjoyed just delving into the history of Colonel Addison. No, not somebody I would hold up as a great hero, but at the same time, the progress. Ninian Bell, Bealle, Ninian Bell is another contemporary of his, Scotsman. Addison's from the northeast of England, in the area of oh gosh, what's that town up there? Whitehaven. Okay, got it. All right, so that's another thing to trace the Addisons back to the Dean of Litchfield and his association with very close with William of Orange. Addison was hired by Godolphin to write an epic poem about the Battle of Blenheim, Blenheim, to glorify the Duke of Marlborough for the fantastic, military battle. And so think of Joseph Addison as that type that's going to write as a professional writer for the establishment that is represented by Godolphin and the oligarchy that's behind William of Orange.